Welcome to Simple Discipleship Unfiltered.
Unfiltered.
Where no topic is off limits.
Hey, welcome to Simple Discipleship Unfiltered. I'm Diana.
I'm Kendall.
And we're missing Ashton.
So sad.
I'm so sad.
I'm sitting in her spot, and it's so weird.
It's weird. It looks weird to see you over
I
there.
do like the end seat better, but I don't like
her not being
this.
there.
Yeah, it's weird.
Y'all pray for little Cash.
Yeah.
Really sick today, so pray for him. But we do have a special guest with us today. We have Miss Audia Davis.
Woo-hoo.
Woo, woo, woo.
She's excited.
Yeah. More like terrified.
Whatever those emotions are.
Because you know what I did? I didn't give her any time to think about it. I just said, hey, what do you think about, come over to the building and, let's discuss what's going to be going on for 2024. And I said, oh, by the way, why don't you just do your testimony while you're there? Because if not, you're going to be petrified for days, right?
She does it to all of us. It's not just you.
Oh, so good to know.
So those of you that don't know, Sister Audia is over our United in Prayer movement, our United in Prayer Texas. And I'm going to just ask her, what do you foresee for that ministry for 2024?
I think for 2024, we've tried some parks. Maybe in the spring we'll branch out to some different outside areas. But I have felt like God is telling me to find different churches that will allow us to come in maybe on a Friday night or sometime, during the week and hold a prayer vigil and let us, come in and pray with the people and just let the Holy Spirit work.
Yeah, and what we see is the hard part is getting other churches to
This is very hard.
join in because they're so afraid you're going to take someone, right?
That's true.
And we're really not about that, And so what we've tried to do, I know you've tried to reach out to other churches when we were doing it at the park, and I love those nights that we have in the park because Holy Spirit shows up, right?
Absolutely.
It's so powerful, and the whole thing that we do is we get into some praise and worship, and we just invite the audience to get into the praise and worship, and then Holy Spirit just moves. I mean, there's not, somebody may give a word, but usually it's just praising God out in the open, and people just come and receive whatever it is they need, and so it's exciting, for us to do this. I'm thankful to be a part, that M3 gets to be a part of this ministry with you, and so.
Well, and I think it's so vital right now for this ministry because not only, I feel like we have issues with maybe getting into churches because of whatever reasons of taking people or whatever, but even, you're probably not going to hear it said, but the lack of prayer that in the strength that we have in prayer right now, just as the body of Christ, I feel like, because let's be honest, even at Round Pen, when we've called prayer meetings, how many people showed up?
Right.
Not very many.
Out of a big congregation.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say, percentage-wise of that big of a
congregation.
congregation.
I mean, you're less than 10%.
Less,
maybe 5.
Yeah.
And so it's just in general, prayer is just, for some reason, it's losing its steam, or maybe it's lost its steam for quite some time. But just from my awareness of it, this ministry is so needed because at the end of the day, we have to pray.
Yeah, we do. I mean it's you can't get around it. You cannot get around. Jesus did it. Yeah. Jesus did it a lot.
And he taught us how to pray.
Yeah. So. And how do we expect to move forward in life? Or, I just, even just people walking around with no sense of direction saying, I mean, how many times do you just hear people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And it's like, pray. Yeah. And he might not give you the answer in 2 seconds, but he sure does show up.
Yeah, he does.
And I've always told people prayer is a conversation that you have with God. And just talk to him like you would a good friend.
Yep.
Pour your heart out.
Yeah.
And you're praying.
It is. And I think that we make it harder than it is. And so I think it seems so monstrous to do when it's so simple. The gospel in and of itself is so simple, and so, I was talking to you earlier, and I just kind of threw on you to come and share part of your testimony, but it's so powerful, and I'm so thankful to have you a part of this ministry. I know that the girls feel the same, but really, I think looking at you, people would go, oh, I bet she's got a little testimony. You know what I'm saying? But when you gave your testimony, when you gave your testimony at the singles one night, I almost fell out of my chair. I was just like,
when she did it on Sunday night Bible study, I think my eyes were bigger than. And she just kept on reading. I'm like, oh my.
Yeah.
You thought you were bad,
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So
the thing I've learned is that if God can take someone that was as broken as I was,
yes, I know,
and put me in a place to do His work, He can do it to anybody.
He can do it to anybody.
Yeah.
But that's what we've always taught, right? That you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and what? The word of your testimony. And so that's how you overcome, because the more that we share our testimony, the more we keep in mind of where God has brought us from.
Right.
And how big He is.
That's true.
Especially when we feel like we're just overwhelmed, we can realize how big He is just by realizing what He brought us through, And it had to be Him. It wasn't anything we did, right? Yeah. So would you just kind of go and share your testimony with us, whatever you feel led to give?
Well, I'm just going to give you the one I've given, and because it's the only way I know how to do it. Okay, so when I was 5 years old, my mother left my brother and sister, who were twins, and me with a neighbor, and said she was going to the commissary. My dad was in the Air Force, and he was in Alaska. She never came back. And so my dad was brought home from Alaska, and then my grandmother came from Shreveport, and she took us, the three of us, to be home with her. Something really weird about that is I loved my grandparents. They were, I was the apple of their eye. But that whole year, I don't remember anything about that year. All I remember, the next thing I remember is my dad came to pick us up, and he told us that.
You said you were 5?
I was 5. I was the oldest.
Wow.
And my dad came to pick us up. He had this woman in the car with him, and he said, your mother's dead, and I've gotten married again. And that's all he told us. And when you're, 5 years old, sitting there like, what does that mean? The sad part about it was that not very long after they got married and we were living there on the base, my dad had to go back to Alaska, and she said to us several times, if y'all get up in the morning and I'm not here, take the letter you're going to find to the next door neighbor. Wow. And sure enough, the next morning we got up, she was gone. Took the letter over to the neighbor. Well, I couldn't read. It was in cursive, and I was only 5, so I had no idea what the letter said. But I just know they called my dad, come back from Alaska, and he didn't have anybody to take care of us at that point. My grandparents or my aunt and uncle that also lived in Shreveport said the only way they would take us back was if my dad would let my aunt and uncle adopt us, and my dad wasn't going to do that. So he put us in a home for children called Hendricks Home there in Abilene. It's kind of like the Buckner Home here in Dallas. People can't take care of their kids, or they've been, the kids have been taken away. My sister and I lived in a dorm with a bunch of other girls, and then on the other side of the home where the boys lived. So the only time I got to see my brother was at mealtime or when we were allowed to go outside and play. Mm-hmm. The one thing I will say for my dad is he flew home almost every weekend to see us. And, I can't fault him for what happened. I don't know the whole story, but I just know that he came, he did the best he could at the time. And then my dad, one time he came and he picked us up and he said he was going to take us to meet someone, and he took us to this lady's home, and he told us that they were planning on getting married. She had 2 older daughters, and so not long after that they got married, and we all moved into her house. And it wasn't too long after that, when my dad was gone, the abuse started. And it was more of like, did I tell you to do something and you didn't do it? And she would slap you across the face. And I mean, slap you. And I'd never had anybody hit me before. I didn't even know that people did that to other people. I was terrified and I didn't know what to do. And then, there was one time I was walking home from school, and I was late walking home because I was talking to some other kids, and she came at me with a switch and spanked me on my legs all the way home with a switch. Those are the 2 things that really stood out. But as we got older, the abuse became more abusive. She started using a piece of a 2x4 to spank us and hit us. And shortly after that, we moved to Florida for a couple of years, and then my dad was out of the service, so we moved to Houston. And that was the first time I really started going to church, other than the short time I went there in the Hendricks home, because it was a Baptist home. So we started going to a Baptist church. And that was really my first exposure to church. And one Sunday night, they were having a revival, and this preacher said, "Everybody that's saved, sit down." Like, I couldn't sit down. I wasn't saved. My brother and sister couldn't sit down. They weren't saved. So it was like, okay, if you couldn't sit down, you're supposed to come up here and get saved. So,
way to call them out.
Yeah.
You don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Yikes.
It was.
I probably would have lied.
Yeah. Well, I knew better than to sit down, because I knew I was, that had gotten jerked back up. But so quote, I got saved, and I got baptized. But truthfully, I didn't feel any different. I didn't, have any. But I went along with it. I'm saved. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm going.
Well, can I ask you, what in the saved part of it? Because, what was it in that revival that they said, do this and you'll be saved? Other than if you're not, or if you're saved, sit down. Then
do you ask Jesus Christ to come into your heart and forgive you of your sins?
And of course, everybody there's going to be like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You done called me out, so
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, mm-hmm.
I'm 12 years old. What do you expect me to say?
Yeah.
So.
And then when was your baptism?
Like right after that.
Same day?
No, the next week.
Gotcha.
And so, but I just went along with it. I went to church, but I was kind of always the kid that caused the trouble, got in trouble. I used to say I would sit there and figure out, okay, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this. How bad am I going to get in trouble if I do this?
I think it's going to be worse.
I think that's what Liam's doing right now.
I used to, kind of, okay, I'm probably going to get grounded for 3 weeks or,
Is 3 weeks that bad?
Yeah, 3 weeks, not that bad. Don't ever get to go anywhere anyway, So, but it just, I got to, but my stepmother was constantly not only physically abusing me, but mentally abusing me and saying, oh, you're just like your mother. You're going to be promiscuous. You're, no man's, you're never going to amount to anything. And,
Did she actually know your mom?
No. But what I know of my mom, I did actually get to see her, and to see her, she was not dead. After Stephanie was born, she reappeared. But she waited until my dad had passed away, my grandparents had passed away, and there was nobody to contradict the story she was going to tell about
Gotcha.
why she left. But yeah, she evidently, and I heard stories. I had people tell me, I knew your mom. She was, you know, she just couldn't, you know. There was she ran off with another man. I did find that out. She did run off with another man, and my grandparents looked for her for years, but they never could find her. And then finally, the man had gone AWOL from the service, and so he, I guess the FBI finally caught up with him, and so my grandparents were able to talk to him. But he said he got up one morning, my mom was gone. He didn't know where she was. So that was, you know, until she reappeared. Then I never knew she was alive. But I think part of me never felt like she was dead. You know, part of me just kind of felt like, I don't know if I believe that story, you know. But she was pretty, from what I understand, she was pretty promiscuous. She was, you know, I know she ran around on my dad, you know. She wasn't. But when I did meet her, she had been married for, I don't know, to this man she was married to. They'd been married for quite some time. And as far as I knew, you know, I never met him, only got to see her. But,
So did it give you the closure that you needed?
yes. You know, she said, you know, basically what she said was, your dad was a horrible person. He drank a lot. He, you know, he did this, he did that. And I said, and this was part of what I'll get into too, when my first husband turned out to be extremely abusive. And I said, you know, my first husband turned out to be an alcoholic and abusive, but I didn't leave my child with him and go away. I took my child with me and got out of there. And I said, if my dad was that horrible, you could have taken us and gone to Shreveport.
But you had a conversation with her.
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and I did, and she was like, well, you have my only grandchildren, and I want to be a part of their lives. And I said, I don't think so. I said, I don't think so. I said, you can't just pop in, because I can't take you and introduce you to my children, and then you disappear again.
Yeah.
I can't take that chance to have to explain to them why this grandmother that suddenly appeared disappeared again. So I said no. But but as I was saying, I went in when I got to college. That was my first. I thought, thank you God for getting me out of that house, get me away from those people. Now I can live like I want to, you know, and do all those things I was never allowed to do. I could stay out, I could party, I could drink, you know, all those things I never did when I was home. And so college, it took me about 6 weeks of college to say, you're paying for this and you're fixing to flunk out. You know, you better straighten up and go to class and start doing stuff. So I did. I mean, I got through college, but the one thing in college was, you know, I went to college in the 70s. You know, it was sex, drugs, rock and roll. And at first, when people around me were smoking pot, I was like, oh no. No, I'll drink. I'll drink that cheap wine and that, you know, cheap beer, but I don't think I want to do that pot. And I think it was, I don't know if any of y'all ever remember this or ever heard this movie, but there was a movie we all had to watch back in the 60s and the 70s called Reefer Madness. And it showed, people smoking pot, and the next thing they were shooting heroin. So I was convinced that if I started smoking pot, next day I'd be looking for heroin. Yeah. But, that didn't happen. And I did, and I did smoke pot, but I only smoked it at a party or something. It wasn't anything I ever bought. If it was offered, I didn't turn it down. I met someone in college, and my parents didn't particularly care for him, but I always thought it was just my parents weren't going to like anybody that I brought home, But so, and his parents weren't all that terribly fond of me, but so
that made you want him all the more, right?
Well, and I'll tell you the truth. We had decided we were going to get married, and his mother said to me, "I only pushed y'all to get married because I thought he would break up with you. He would freak him out to get married this young." So I was like, "Oh, thank you." It was like that was a little bit of a shock, but so we did. We eloped. We got married. And my parents didn't speak to me till, I don't know, we got married in August. They finally spoke to me about Thanksgiving. I went out there and did the whole mea culpa. I'm a terrible daughter, please forgive me and stuff. But and then I guess we'd been married a couple of years. Well, first of all, we had been married maybe about a little over a year. And we went out with some friends to this bar, and we used to go to a lot. And I was sitting there, and he had gone up to the bar and to get another drink or something, and this guy walked over and asked me to dance. And I said, "No, I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea." And he's when my husband came back to the table, he said, "Would you mind if I danced with your wife?" And, of course, he went, "Oh, fine, go right ahead." I was like, okay, I guess I'll get up and dance. Well, when we got home and I was walking into the bedroom, and he grabbed me by the hair and jerked my head around and knocked the ever-living snot out of me and said, "Oh, you just think you're so cute and so sexy and so hot and all these men want you." And I went, "No." No. And he said, "Well, that ends now." And I was like, okay. I didn't want to dance with him. You told him to dance with me, And so after that, it didn't matter, I could be standing there with the refrigerator open, looking in the refrigerator to see what was in there, and he would come up and slam it behind me and go, "Quit letting all the cold air out," and slap me or hit me. Wow. I mean, it didn't take a lot. And then right after, I was actually thinking about that I needed to get out of there. I needed to leave. And I found out I was pregnant. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to stick this out. And right after I came home from the hospital after having my son, he wanted to go play tennis, and I said, I haven't had a lot of sleep. I really could use your help to stay home, and if you would stay home. And he was like, "No, I'm going to play tennis." So when he was in the bedroom getting ready, I took his tennis racket and hit it. It's really stupid. But
and then when he found it, see what happened was.
I'm fixing to get punched.
And then he was like, "Have you seen my tennis racket?"
Before it was grounded for 3 weeks, and now it's, I'm about to get knocked out.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Yeah. And so, it was like he came out, and I guess he went out to the car, and his tennis racket wasn't there, and he came back in and he said, "Have you seen my tennis racket?" And I said, "No." all over it.
That wasn't even believable.
Wrong answer. I'm not a good liar, y'all. I'm really not. But so he started. This time it wasn't just hit me. He was strangling me. He had his hand on my throat, and he was pounding my head against the wall. And he, where's my tennis racket? And finally I said, it's in the trunk of the car. Just let me breathe, And so he left to go play tennis. And that was kind of, after that, we were living in Waco. After that, we moved. He got this job. We moved to Oklahoma, to Lawton. And when we were there, probably about 3 or 4 months, I was working on the Army base in one of the dental clinics, and we had gone over to the commissary and had lunch, and I think I had a burger or something, and I got really sick afterwards, and I thought I had food poisoning. So I came home. Then the next night, I made spaghetti, and I got really, really sick again, and I thought something's really wrong. So I went to the emergency room and found out I had gallstones. So after a couple of months of constant gallbladder attacks, they agreed to take it out. And while I was in the hospital, one of the guys he worked with hooked him up with one of his friends. Oh. And I didn't know it. At the time I just know I was in the hospital for a week and he didn't come up there at all. And then when I came home, Scott was just like, Mom, Mom, Mom. He was just little. He was barely a year old. And I couldn't go up the stairs, but I kind of could get him to crawl up the stairs to go to his room. So I got him to do that, and then I went in our bedroom and I noticed that the sheets were off the bed. And I thought, well, that's weird. He's never changed the bed in his life. And so...
Hey,
that's
your sign out there. That's your sign.
Don't be acting like you cleaning around here.
So I went and got some sheets out, and I started putting sheets on the bed, and the phone rang, and when I answered it, they hung up. And then I started finishing up the bed. I answered the phone again. They hung up. I was like, oh, my gosh, this is so stupid. And finally, he came home, and I heard the phone ring, and we both actually picked it up at the same time.
Ruh-roh.
And I heard this woman say, are you coming over tonight? And he said, well, I don't know, because she's home from the hospital. I'll probably have to stay here. But I'll see what I can do. And so I very carefully came downstairs.
You do that. I remember, I'm having a flashback, but on the good old rotary phones, you could just very slowly push down the thing and then hang it up real soft.
Yeah.
So they would never know you were on there, right?
Yeah. So I came downstairs. I've never done anything like this in my life, and I've never done anything like it since. But I walked over to one of the kitchen drawers like I was going to get something out, and I did. I got a meat cleaver out. And I put it to his throat.
Oh, my gosh.
And I just said, who is she? And he went, what?
This is like an episode of Snapped, right here. This is the episode of Snapped. But
I'm thinking like a Lifetime movie or something.
It's going to evolve into this.
Nobody wants to play me.
It depends on how this ends. Go ahead.
So, anyway,
Did he lose any appendages?
No, he did not, but he did confess. It was like, I haven't slept with her or anything. We've just been hanging out, and she's, she's married with 3 kids. And
you said, you a lie because you done took the sheets off the bed.
I said, and then why are the sheets off the bed, And he was like, well, she had come over. And Scott was screaming right then, so I did put the meat cleaver down to go see what was wrong with him. And he was like, I was like, just get the F out of this house, Yeah. And so I went upstairs, and Scott was like, "Don't shut my door, don't shut my door." And that's when I found out that she was coming over to the house. He would put Scott up in his room and shut the door. And Scott was, was like, "Don't shut my door, don't shut my door." So it took me a while to get him to calm down to where I could put him to bed and close his bedroom door. For a long time, I had to leave his bedroom door open. But then right after that, the company he was working for started to go under. And
But y'all still together.
we're still together. And I said, okay,
Where's the chick?
here's the deal. I was kind of like, God, if you get me back to Dallas,
There's a country song right there.
if you just get me to Dallas, I'll divorce this son of a bitch.
Yeah. And you had to.
Yeah.
At that point, you're
Yeah.
like, I'm about to kill him with
Yeah.
a meat cleaver. So something is wrong in the relationship.
Yeah.
You better.
You better.
But so we did. He decided we moved to Dallas. And I waited until I had to live there 6 months. And during that time, I did get a job and everything, and I was working and just pretending like everything was hunky dory. And then one day I got the flu, and I was sick as a dog. And so he was getting ready to go to work, and I was laying on the couch, and Scott was in his playpen, and he said, "Get up and go to bed." I said, "No, Scott's in here, and if I go in there, and he won't know where I am, and he can't get to me if he needs me. I'm just going to lay here on the couch. I'll be fine." Well, he grabbed me by my hair and drug me into the bedroom. And then, of course, Scott was screaming because he saw all this, and he came out, and he slapped him. And I went, "That's it. You can hit me because I can fight back if I have to. But that baby can't fight back. That's it. We are done." And 2 days after I got well, I went and found an attorney, and I filed for divorce.
Did he ever try to come after you, though?
No. No, he knew I was done. He knew I was done. And it wasn't very long after that I met my second husband. And we started dating, and we had dated for a while, and then we decided to rent a house together because and that we were going to get married. And Scott just said, out of the blue of his own volition said, "Can I call him Daddy?" And I said, "That's something you have to ask him." So he did. He asked him, "Can I call you my daddy?" And he said, "Yeah." And of course, Mike was upset about it. But then about 3 months later, I kind of heard through the grapevine that he had gotten a raise in his job. And so I called him up and I said, "I heard you got a raise." He goes, "Yeah, I got a really nice one." I said, "Well, guess what? I'm going to take you to court for more child support." So, because what's yours is mine. And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "I'm very serious." I said, "Or you can let Jeff adopt Scott." He goes, "Well, let me think it over, and I'll call you back." I went, "Wow, okay." Wasn't the answer I expected, but that's what I got. And about a week later, he called me and said, if he wants to adopt him, that's fine. So he's been out of our lives. I mean, Scott was 3 at that point. And, I mean, I know where he is, only because his name popped up on Facebook as a possible friend, and I went, no. No to the no.
Remove.
So that's why I said when you were going to Nashville, when y'all were going there, and I said, would you go into CVS and I want you to go in and ask for this certain guy, and then I want you to throat punch him. And you wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do it.
It was Jesus. It was Jesus. But honestly, if I had known the story, the backstory, I might have had to pray afterward. One of those, lay hands on them and raise them up after you.
Yeah.
Right?
Something my grandma always says is just do it and ask for forgiveness later.
So after we were married for quite a while. We were married a little about 3 or 4 years, and we decided we wanted to start a family. I got pregnant with my daughter, and she was just amazing. I mean, whereas Scott, and I don't know that I've said too much about him, but he has special needs. He takes a lot, and he always has, and even now as a grown up, he still is. But he's my son, and I love him. But it meant a lot to me that Jeff was willing to take that on. I mean,
and he still
does,
right?
and he still does. And to this day, even though we're no longer together, we've kind of made our peace. But he was always a much better father than he ever was a husband. So I will give him that credit. But during the time in our marriage, we went along, and I thought everything was fine. We were, and what I did fail to mention was back when I was about 16, I talked with our youth pastor and stuff, and said, I don't think I'm saved, and I need to do this, and I just feel like God's telling me I need to do this. So when I was 16, I went back and for the real time, asked Jesus to come into my life, and became a Christian and got baptized again. So
let me ask you this, because you did the rededication thing. Basically, you did it the first time, because we know that the first time really didn't count, right? So, when you were doing the things that you were doing, just because you had your freedom to do those things, what did it make you feel like afterward?
It was, it was like in my heart I knew it wasn't right, but it was like the church that I was raised in was, if you do this, God's going to punish you. If you do this, God's going to smite you. If it's like if you have sex before you get married, God will punish you, and everybody will know. It was never a church that was God is love. It was never God is love. It was don't. And so for me, when I went off to college, it was kind of like, I got to get away from those Baptists. I got to get as far away from those Baptists. It wasn't that I wanted to get that far away from
the Baptists on Footloose.
Yeah.
You can't dance.
The week before my senior prom, which I already had my dress, I had a date, everything was planned. Our pastor stood up and preached about the sins of going to the senior prom, and that
it sounds like Footloose.
Yeah, and that more girls got pregnant after their senior prom than any other time.
He preached a sermon?
Yes.
A full-on sermon to the whole congregation about the prom?
Yes, and I kept sitting there going, I'm not going. I know I'm not going. Luckily I did. I did get to go, but I was like, I'm not going to prom.
Yeah.
The things we could be talking about behind the pulpit, we're talking about prom.
You like legit Footloose.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It was, and that was my whole deal. It was like I felt like I had lived a life of no. And I just wanted to see what yes was.
So when you first started, whether it be drinking or even, because you said eventually you did do some pot and stuff, but like when you first started it, did you have that conviction?
Yeah, I was very, I was very paranoid. The first time I drank, I got deathly sick. I don't know, but I knew that it wasn't the best reputation that I was building, and it wasn't, the best relationship I was having with God, but
Was there ever a time that you felt that conviction kind of subside? Like, does that make sense? Like when...
yeah, there were times that, I felt like I'm really screwing up. And I kind of, probably by my second year of college, I started settling down and, spending more time studying than partying. And
So then, let's go forward, because I know I want to get to this meaty part of your story.
I gotta get to the good part.
I mean, it's all been good,
Yeah.
because it's your life. And like we say, it just tells you how big God is when you see yourself sitting here today.
Yeah.
But you're in your second marriage, your daughter's getting older, you're hanging out. Tell us what happens then. What happens?
Well, at one point, I was like, we need to, and you asked me if I did start getting convicted. I was like, we need to go to church as a family. I want us to start going to church as a family. And so my next door neighbors went to the Baptist church. They invited us to go. So we go to the Baptist church, and when we were coming home, I asked Jeff, I said, how did you like it? And he goes, why does the guy have to yell so much? So I said, well, where'd you go to church when you were a kid? Well, I went to the Methodist church. I said, okay, well, next week we'll go visit a Methodist church. We came out of there, and he goes, what'd you think? And I said, before or after I fell asleep. So, I mean, it was what I wasn't used to it. To me, it was boring.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, we started this time, okay, it's time to stop, and I don't know, it was just different, and I didn't get it, So we actually, somebody came by and was handing out flyers to this non-denominational church that was going to meet in a hotel not very far from us. So we decided to go there, and I loved it. The kids loved it. Jeff actually really liked it, and we were going to church there. Scott got saved and baptized about a year or so after that. Stephanie got saved and baptized, and they and they really liked it. They were learning. We were going to church. We were going to things with the church. And then they decided to close that church and move it to Plano.
Mm.
And it wasn't convenient for us to go there. I mean, we went a couple of times, but it was hard to get there to there. And so we quit going.
And then what happened?
And then we started kind of having a few problems here and there. Jeff never had a very strong work ethic. And I was always pretty much the breadwinner of our family. And he came from a family of money, and when I first met him, he was living on a trust fund. But that kind of ran out. But and he did work, but he never wanted to work very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Just never wanted to work very hard. So after Stephanie was born, I told him, I said, here's the deal. You have got to get a job. You have got to find a job that brings home a weekly or bi-weekly paycheck. And you have got to start. I cannot do this and raise two kids. And so I said, if you want to go back to school, I'll work while you go back to school. And then, I'll do whatever. And so he he agreed. He said he always liked cars, so he decided he was going to be a mechanic. So he went enrolled in Lincoln Tech, and I was working 2 jobs just to make sure we had enough money coming in. And then after he got out of school, he found a job, a good job, and it had insurance and everything, and so it was really good. And then his mom talked him into doing they were opening these dry cleaners, and she talked him into quitting his job and going and managing this dry cleaner. Only the people they were partnering with wanted that dry cleaner open 7 days a week. And it just was more than he could handle. And he really did feel like he was going to have a nervous breakdown because he was always working, and when he wasn't working, he was home sleeping. And so he went back to being a mechanic, which was fine with me. I mean, I just wanted him to do something that made him happy. But he started getting to where he, I think he was a really heavy pot smoker when I met him. And so he wasn't smoking pot anymore. And I think he kind of had to have something to kind of fill that void. And he started getting into pornography. And I just found it gross. I mean, I was like, why do you like this? And it got to be, our life got to be, it had to be on for us to have any kind of intimacy.
What? It had to be on? Oh, my.
Yeah. Because, it's like, can you put your leg over there? Look, put your leg. 45 degrees.
Oh, my God. Like, I just...
For educational purposes.
Like, this ain't a workout video, homie.
It feels like
Turn it off.
Well,
Wow. Oh, wow. That's
and all I
gross.
could do is like, when I was like, oh, gross, her nail's broken. Her false eyelashes is coming undone. And I just couldn't get into it. So, that kind of killed the mood.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
That broken nail.
Your weave is no good.
Oh, my.
Yeah, that would kill it.
So, basically, I started kind of just...
Because how does it make you feel, though?
It made me feel very inadequate. First of all,
Yeah.
I was overweight.
I mean, I've been there. That's my point. Is it makes you feel like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, it was rough. And he started kind of sleeping in his recliner or out on the couch, and never gave me a reason. He just did. And pretty much we were just kind of like two people passing in the night. So I started hanging out with a bunch of my girlfriends that had kids my kids' age. And but first it was just like we were playing cards, having a couple of drinks, maybe. The kids were playing. Sometimes they'd sleep over. Mostly they were single or divorced, or they were. So we were just kind of in that. I was kind of in that, and so it kind of got to be an every Friday night thing. And then one night, we're sitting there playing cards, and this other friend of my friend comes over, and she brings cocaine.
It escalated quickly.
I mean, that's different than the puff pass. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's deep. So
Yeah.
what did you feel?
And
like?
I was like, well, I've never tried this before. I've never done it. And they're like, oh my God, you'll love it. You'll just have the best time. You'll just we can play cards all night.
And the kids are still there?
She said, we're going to play cards all night.
Well, the kids are in the other room,
Oh,
and we weren't doing it
fine.
right out there in the living room or in the dining room. We were going off to the other room to do it.
Had
And-
this friend, like, had she already been doing that and then just decided to bring it to the function?
Yeah.
Add it to the party.
Did other people know that she, like, had that?
I
Addiction.
didn't. I don't know if my other friend did. I suspect she did.
Because I was like, man, she just went from just a little bit of wine, cocaine,
Yeah.
bam.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it got to be an every Friday night thing.
Jeez.
And then it kind of got to be where maybe I should chip in since I'm not paying for any of this.
You're going to get talked about if you
Yeah.
don't. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah. So, it's like, okay, how much does this stuff cost? And then it's like, well, if I paid for that, then I'm taking the rest home,
Mm.
So it was, and then I didn't really care what my husband was doing. I didn't really care. I didn't give a flying flip. He could, I just didn't care. I mean, I cared about my kids. I never missed work. I didn't let that interfere with my work. I was still going to work every day. I was being a mom.
Because you worked with your same employer for how many years?
40 years.
40 years. The same employer for 40 years.
So they weren't drug testing nobody.
No. Well, I never had a reason to.
You're still showing up. And you're still
I'm doing
good.
my job, and I'm doing a good job. Why would they question it?
Right.
But I wasn't using it at work either. It wasn't something I was doing at work or even during the week when I was working at first.
Just Friday nights.
Just Friday nights and
Maybe Saturday.
maybe a lot of times Saturday, and then I got to get this stupid house cleaned up.
You want to get that house clean, take a little hit.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. Like a crew.
Or I got to drive to such and so place. It's a long drive. That was probably one of the stupidest things I ever did.
I was going to say.
So when did you come to the realization that this might have become a problem?
When we were going to drive to St. Louis for a soccer tournament for Stephanie, and I couldn't get any.
Mm.
And I thought, how am I going to make this drive? But I did. I had a splitting headache all the way there and all the way back. But I did it. And when I got back, I found out my friend had gone to rehab.
Mm.
She was a lot worse off than she was like every day, all day long. She looked like death warmed over.
Mm.
But, and I just stopped. I just stopped.
And it's a testament of God on your life, because
Yeah.
that just doesn't happen.
No.
It just doesn't happen.
But when I stopped, reality kind of set in. And,
Because then your husband's sitting in the chair
yeah.
all the time. And you're going to realize he's still sitting in the same chair.
He's still sitting in the same chair.
Yeah.
We still have the same problems. It's
How long was that stretch that you were using?
Maybe a year and a half.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. That's why I say it just doesn't happen, to just be able to just say, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Or I don't have access to it, or whatever
Yeah.
the reason. And
I didn't have
it.
access. I wasn't going to do it. So, and I wasn't going to go out looking for it.
Mm.
And so,
But think what the path of your life could have been in that one moment.
oh yeah,
Because if you had just took that one step to say, I got to have it, and you go out looking for it, there's no telling what you would have done for that. And and it could have, the trajectory would have been just completely
oh yeah,
a different story.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at that and I think, God certainly was, he was there.
He was there.
He was there. But, yeah, the marriage was on the rocks big time. And so I finally set my husband down and I said, I don't want to live like this anymore. We had tried counseling before. He didn't. He would always find something wrong with the counselor and we'd quit. And finally I said, you can pick the counselor. We can go back to counseling. We can do whatever it takes. And he gave me an answer I wasn't prepared for. He said, being married is hard. It takes a lot of effort. And I just don't think you're worth the effort.
Mm.
Ouch.
Steve.
Yeah, it was a big ouch.
And so then what happened?
So then I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I guess I'll move out. I mean, I think he'd been planning it. I mean, I think in his mind he had been deciding this for a while. So he went and found an apartment and we told the kids and of course, Scott was grown. Stephanie was in junior high. And we, it was, but he left me in a really bad place. We obviously had a lot of bills. And he moved out and it was like, you're on your own now. You know, he wasn't giving me any money. He did see the kids, but he wasn't giving me a dime. And so I was working, and Stephanie was playing club soccer, which was extremely expensive. And I was working 3 jobs. I would get up in the morning at 4 a.m. I would go down to this warehouse, roll my newspapers, go out and throw the Dallas Morning News.
Used to do that.
Yep. Then I'd come home, take a shower, go to my regular job, work till 5 o'clock.
Because you're going to be covered in black ink
Yeah.
all over you when you're doing that, right?
Yeah, but I can go home and shower, and then I'd go to my job. And so, and then I'd get off at 5, and if there was a concert out at Starplex, I'd go out there and work. And that's how I paid for her soccer. That money all went to her soccer. And so, and then I'd come home, and you'd think at midnight I'd fall on my face in bed, but half the time I couldn't go to sleep. I was everything was just piling up on me, and it's just piling up on me, and I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, which for me was unheard of. I mean, I just couldn't, I just was like a robot. I was doing what I needed to do to take care of my kids and survive.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a heart attack. So that was my big wake-up call.
And that was when?
96. And at first I I think I might be having a heart attack. I'll just drive myself over to the emergency room and see. I mean, my brain.
Yeah.
You know?
You're still in mama
I think
bear
I
mode.
think I'm having a heart attack. Don't call an ambulance. Go drive yourself to the hospital.
Let's go see.
You know. So I went over to the ER, and the doctor told me that women of my age, which was in my 40s, didn't have heart attacks. And I said, okay, well, then what's wrong with me? I mean, I was breaking out in a cold sweat. My shirt was soaking wet. My jaw hurt. My arm hurt. I mean, everything hurt. So my chest hurt. It felt, and he didn't even do an EKG. He just said he thought I had a spastic esophagus, and that's why I was having trouble swallowing. He gave me a pill to do that and then sent me home. Well, I sat up all night because I was convinced something else was wrong. I was scared death to go to sleep. And the next morning, I guess they had called my doctor. My doctor called me and said, do not go to work. Come straight here. So I called my office, said I wasn't coming in, and drove over to the doctor. He put me, and I looked in the mirror. I was like gray. I mean, I was gray. I'd never been that color. And he put me on the table. They did an EKG, and he said, you've had a heart attack. You're going to the hospital. And I went, okay, well, I'll go home and pack a bag. And he goes, no, you're going in an ambulance. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. I was very calm about it. And even after they got me there and they got me checked in and they got me in ICU and they, the next day they did an anteriogram or angiogram, you know, and they said you have, well, first of all, they got me on the table, gave me 5 milligrams of Valium, and started.
Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, started, and the doctor got called away to surgery. So they sent me back to my room. So a couple hours later, they come back and get me again. They gave me another 5 milligrams of Valium. And they did the angiogram, and he goes, you've got 3, maybe 4 blocked arteries, and you need to have heart surgery. And I went, okay. I was like, what was I going to say? No, you know.
So were they able to like roto-rooter it, or did they have to do stents?
They did 1 stent and 3 bypasses. But it was like, all my friends that came up and everything, they're all like freaking out. And in my mind, I knew, I don't know why, but I knew God was not going to let me die. I knew I wasn't going to die.
Yes,
So,
you kind of had a peace about it.
yeah, I just was like, let's just get this done. It'll be fine.
Wow.
So, and during this, and so when I got out of the hospital, about 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, I went back to I went in for my checkup, and the doctor said, I said, when can I go back to work? And he said, well, I'd really rather wait 6 weeks. And I said, how badly do you want to get paid? Because I need to go back to work. So he let me go ahead and go back to work. And a couple of weeks after that, I came home. Stephanie was playing basketball. I was changing clothes to go to a ball game, and the phone rang. And one of her friends said, you need to get up here right away. Jeff is here, and I think he's had a heart attack. It's like, really? So I got up there. They, told them they were taking him to the hospital, and I got in there. And you're not gonna. I don't even know if I'll even say this.
Say it.
He wants to see me back there. His mother. They've called his mom. She's there too, but he wants to see me. And he says, so I went in there because he pretty much made it clear this marriage was done, over with. It wasn't, He said, reach in my pocket and get my keys. And don't let anybody in my apartment. You're the only one that can go in there. And I went, well, why? Well, there's some movies there I need to get out. I need you to get out. I was like, oh, are you kidding me?
Am I on the movie?
No. You get your leg that high. Wow.
Isn't that funny? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I did. I went over there and found the movies, dumped them all in the dumpster. And
somebody dumpster diving had him a jackpot. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't believe what I found.
I mean, I wasn't going to keep him at my house for him, so I just
No.
dumped him.
Dump it.
And so, yeah, that was, and then right after that, after he got well and went back to work and stuff, he told me he had kept everything. I had filed for divorce because he didn't want to file. He wanted the divorce, but he didn't want to file. So I don't know if he thought it would make him look like a bad guy or what, but
He didn't want to pay the
Or
money.
you just want to pay the money.
Yeah.
well, he kept every time my lawyer would call him and say, "Okay, are you ready to sign the papers?" He'd like, "Well, I don't know. I've been looking them over this and this and this." And and the agreement we had was if I filed for the divorce, was he gave me the house free and clear. I didn't have to buy him out. And that was the price of giving him the divorce he wanted. And so he kept stalling on it and stalling. Of course, every time my lawyer called him, that was another cha-ching, in my bill. And then he wanted joint custody. And I said, I will fight you on that because you have a one-bedroom apartment and you don't have a place for Stephanie to stay when she's there. And if you want her to come and stay with you for a week or 2 weeks or whatever you want, she has to have her own room. She has to have a place, her own bathroom. She has to have privacy. I mean, in my house, she's got her own room. She's got her own television. She's got her own TV. She's got her own bathroom. Those are things that if you want her at your house, she has to have too. Has to have that too. So he got a lawyer, or his mother got him a lawyer. Anyway, so my lawyer, we have to go meet his lawyer to talk this over. And we go, it's not even an office, it's in his house. And it's like so overgrown in the front, we have to spread the bushes to get through there. I had to bring Stephanie home a day early from camp because she had to be there too. So we get there. He answers the door in his pajamas. And he goes, "You can come in here. You're early." I said, 5 minutes. So, so finally he comes out. And he said, and I'm waiting for, expecting Jeff to be there because we're supposed to meet, And he comes out and goes, well, Jeff's not coming. He's agreed to whatever you want. You couldn't have called me and told me that? So I was like, and so then he still wouldn't sign the papers. And so my lawyer called him because I told her, I said, I've got all these medical bills. And legally, we're still married. He should have to help pay for them. And so she said, okay. So she called him and she said, if you don't sign the papers, then you have to pay half of her medical bills. And he said, okay, I'll sign them. It's always money.
Yeah,
it's always money.
always money. So So you find yourself at this divorce the second time at what age?
47, 48, 47,
So what
40,
happens?
47. I'm still working 3 jobs. And then I met somebody online. But, in the meantime, and I didn't even realize it at first, the doctor gave me Vicodin for pain because I had a lot of pain from where they took the vein out of my leg. It was really bad. It really bothered me. And he gave me some Vicodin. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, this not only makes my pain go away, it makes me kind of happy.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of
Liking it.
popping those Vicodin and hydrocodone when then it became hydrocodone. And this person I met was a person who also liked it. And it took me maybe about 6 months to figure out that I need to get him out of my life. So I did.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I just quit taking the pills. No, it's just.
Which doesn't happen, you know what I'm saying? So it's like you don't just say I'm just okay. I'm gonna stop cocaine today.
I know.
I'm just gonna stop taking hydrocodone today. If not for the hand of God on your life
know.
for a reason and a purpose.
I
you
know.
So then you go into what? What's next?
Then I was single for a long time. Stephanie was in high school by this point. She started going to Young Life. That's what it's called. And all of her friends went to this Methodist church there in Richardson. And she was like, Mom, will you go to church with me? And I was like, okay. So I went over there and started, and it was different than that first Methodist church I went to. It was a lot more, and I was like, oh my gosh, these people are preaching love and, being kind and, those kind of things. And I was like, okay, I kind of, fit in here. And they were not judgmental, that I was divorced. They didn't, have a problem with that. I went on a couple of the youth pastors asked me if I would go with them on Appalachia service trip. I did a couple of went on those with Stephanie, and I went on a couple of those. And I felt like I was kind of back with God. I started reading my Bible and spending time with God. My life was settled down. I wasn't having to work all those different jobs. I kind of got myself out of debt. Excuse me. I was doing good. I was doing good. I was happy.
Mm-hmm.
My kids were doing well. And Stephanie went off to college, and I was still going to church there. And then I met my third husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't want to date him. He had just gotten divorced. I mean, the ink on his divorce papers were barely dry. I was like, oh, I don't want to be the rebound girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, but no thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
he kept calling. He was persistent. So I finally agreed to lunch, and lunch turned into, do you want to go home and change, and then I'll come pick you up for dinner and a movie? And so then it was dinner and movie, and then get a drink afterwards, and then we sat and talked for till they closed.
Mm.
And he said, well, do you want to come watch football with me tomorrow?
And I'm
said,
with you.
Yeah.
We're kindred like that. So
Yeah.
we're like, my heart would have been going.
I was like, oh my gosh, he might be the one.
That's the magic words. It's the best date ever.
And I said, where? And he said, Sports City. I said, well, I don't get out of church till noon, but I'll come after church and meet you to go. And so we went over there and we watched the Cowboys, and he was surprised I knew all about the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
And he was from Missouri, so he was a huge Chiefs fan. And we just had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was like every day we were together. We loved football. We loved Friday nights. We played trivia at the little sports bar. We went to football games. We did, everything was fun. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bumpy with one of his children. She wasn't real thrilled about him dating. But she warmed up eventually. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then we decided that we kind of wanted to maybe, we started talking about, well, I decided to sell my house. in fact, when I met him, I was getting ready to put it on the market. I just decided I'd been in that house for 25 something years, and there were too many memories in there, and I just couldn't.
Did you get rid of the recliner, or did he take
Oh,
that?
I made him take it when he moved
Yeah,
out.
good. You kind of have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I refuse to have a recliner in my house to this day.
You're scarred.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, yeah, so he was renting a house, and I decided, some friends of mine said, hey, they were living in a garden home, and I was kind of thinking maybe that's what I wanted to do and not mess with yard and any of that kind of stuff. Ended up, the people that he was renting from wanted to move back in the house, and so I ended up buying a house in Mesquite, because where he still had kids in school.
Mm.
And and it was kind of like, it was like, I never said I wanted to get married. He was kind of thinking, we'll get married. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to get married again. And then kind of I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to get married again. He's like, I don't know if I want to get married again. So finally we decided, yeah, we did want to get married again. So we got married. And right after we got married, he started having some health problems. And eventually after Tiandra, his youngest daughter, graduated from high school, we decided to sell that house in Mesquite, and we moved out to Forney with some land. And we loved that house. I mean, it was trashed. It was a foreclosure, but we had so much fun redoing it. You know, we really did. We had a blast redoing it together, and his health problems weren't all that bad, and then all of a sudden they were. And his heart was getting worse, and he had to have a heart transplant. And it was rough. I mean, we went through 5 different times that they told us they had a heart that the heart ended up not being good. And then finally they were going to do an LVAD, which was the mechanical heart, because he was getting so weak, and they were afraid if they didn't do it, then he would be too weak to get a transplant. And they had him on the table to do the LVAD, and they came in and said, stop, we have a heart.
Wow.
So we had 2 great years after that, pretty much, or I thought we did. There were some rocky roads in there. He was very stubborn about taking the medication, all the drugs, and he got really almost angry about it. And I think part of him just made him to the point that he just was so tired of taking all this medication.
Yeah, because it's a lot. It's a whole lot that you
It's a
got
lot.
just to maintain.
It's a lot, you set your timer on your phone for, and every night I had to make sure he took all his pills, and every morning that he took them with him to work. And
So after the 2 years, what happened?
he got up one morning and he couldn't stand up. I mean, he literally collapsed. And I got him over to a chair, and I checked his blood pressure, and it was really low. And so I called the doctor, and they kind of just said, well, just keep him calm, just keep monitoring it. And then it went back up. And then about 4 hours later, it dropped again. And I mean, dropped. And he was like really lightheaded and just really kind of, and I called again. I said, look, I'm bringing him in. I'm not gonna stay up all night doing this. I'm bringing him in. And took him in, and they thought at first, because he had this hernia and they had not wanted to operate on it, that it was the hernia had gotten worse and that maybe it was pressing on his diaphragm, which was causing the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided to operate. I just had this bad feeling about it. I knew it wasn't going to be. And he quit breathing on the operating table. And they put him on ECMO. And I don't know if you know what that is, but basically it's breathing. It's pumping your heart, it's doing everything for you. And they said, well, he doesn't have a heartbeat, he doesn't have a pulse, but we're going to try this one thing, and if he gets it, then we'll take him off, work on taking him off ECMO. Mm-hmm. They put him on it, and they did this little wire thing, and his heart started beating. He said, but he still didn't have pulse. His heart's beating, but he didn't. And then all of a sudden, the machine shot up, and he had blood pressure and a pulse. Mm. So the next day, they woke him up, just for a little bit, asked him if he knew who I was, and he did. Asked him, to point to as best he could, because he couldn't talk. He was intubated. And then they put him back under, and they tried the next day to take him off of ECMO, and his blood pressure dropped again. So they kept him back on it. And they finally, after about 3 more days, they said, we're going to try to take him off again. If we take him off and he does okay, we'll leave him off. If we take him off and he doesn't do okay, we're not going to put him back on it. Mm. And I said, okay. And they took him off, and he was fine. They would wake him up more and more. They finally took the intubate out, did a trach, but he still couldn't talk. They were getting him to breathe more on his own, weaning him off of the respirator thing. And then he was like, they let him be awake, and he was awake and coherent, and even though he couldn't talk to me, he could make signs, and then I think it was like God was giving him this one chance to. I had the girls come up, everybody came, to see him, and then that night he died.
Wow.
His blood pressure dropped, they couldn't get it back up, he went into AFib, and they couldn't shock him back into sinus rhythm.
Mm. So then, what is life like after that?
Well, the one thing I didn't say also was after he had the heart transplant, there had been some people where he worked, his boss was an awesome Christian man, and he had these pastoral counseling that would come in and talk with people if they needed to talk and stuff, and 2 of them got really close to Phil, and when the first time he was in the hospital, they had come up and prayed with me and talked with me and stuff, and one of them said, Phil, well, and the one thing I didn't tell you is he was a disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witness.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, that was a big thing. and I said, that's a deal breaker. I'm telling him, if you ever want to go back, that's fine, but that's a deal breaker. Mm-hmm. Because I'm never going there, and I can't do this. But he said, no, I never want to go back. So one of the pastors suggested that we go to Round Pen and told us about Round Pen. Mm. So we went that first Sunday, and Pastor Toby came up and talked to us afterwards and prayed over him and talked to him, and we went 3 or 4 more times, and then all of a sudden, he didn't want to go anymore. And I said, what's wrong? Why don't you want to go? And he said, I just don't know if I believe like they do. And I said, what do you not believe that they believe? And he was like, I just don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to go back.
He probably just wasn't sure what he believed.
Yeah.
I mean, because of
And
all
I
the
tried,
other.
and we talked, and at one point he said, "Do you believe if once you're saved, you're always saved?" I said, "Absolutely, I do." I said, "There's nowhere in the Bible that says, unless you curse God and whatever, He's not gonna just because you fall off the wagon, so to speak. You're still His child. He still loves you. You still have your salvation. You just have to come back to Him."
So did he ever say that he had made a profession of faith?
I think I asked him, and he said yes, and that he had been baptized.
Mm.
But I think it was more his doing, because I'm not sure they ever really did that. But I know he had been baptized, and he said, "But you really believe that?" And I said, "I absolutely believe that with all my heart."
Mm.
So I don't know. I just think he got really convicted, and it bothered him tremendously.
Of course.
But
So how was life after that, though?
it was.
Because you're how old at this time, and now you're a widow?
I'm in my 60s. And he was 62, I think, 62. I was kind of like, by the time it had been probably a little over a year after he had passed away, I was just really lonely. The kids were great. His kids, I will say this, I love those girls. They have been like real daughters to me too, and they consider Stephanie as their sister and Scott their brother, and they all just get along like we'd been a family forever. And they were really good about, checking in on me, taking care of me, making sure I was okay, helping me out and stuff. But it just was, at night I'm sitting there and I'm like, nobody to talk to, nothing to do,
Yeah.
And it was hard to go to my friends, and everybody's married, because we had a lot of friends couple friends. And everybody's married, and they don't want to exclude me. They want me to be there, but still I'm there, and I'm it's just me. And I asked my kids, I said, what would y'all think about me dating? I'm just really lonely. I just would find some companionship or something. And they were like, I kind of think that you would have done it a long time ago. I was like, well, I didn't want to make anybody upset, But that was, I don't know, dating had changed.
Yeah. Right there with you, sister. Right there
And
with you.
it wasn't what I thought it would be.
No.
I thought it would be these nice older gentlemen. We'd go to a movie. Maybe we'd go to dinner.
Chivalrous and
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And it wasn't like that.
No, the blue pill changed the world. You know what I'm saying?
Did. I did.
I'm just serious. The blue pill changed the world.
I told one of my friends, she said, well, what about that guy that you were dating? I said, if I go out to dinner with one more guy that tells me he took a blue pill, I'm going to reach across the table with my fork and stab him.
because you're like having dinner. Listen,
Yeah.
you're on a date. You just met somebody, and you're having dinner, and he tells you that he took the blue pill.
Why
Just
does that
in
matter?
case.
I mean, I know
After
what it
your
is, but-
enchilada, you want some. I'm like, well, now I can't even eat. Because, because I'm just thinking, that's just nasty. I don't know you,
Yeah.
right? And it's just maybe some ladies like that. It's just nasty to me.
But yeah, it was.
I'm not kidding. I never saw more pee pictures in my whole life than when I dated online.
There's so many pictures
So many pee
out
pictures
there floating on the cloud that I got that I
I'm
deleted.
like, don't you have a job? It's like, you're just constantly in the bathroom taking pee-pee picture. I'm like, what?
Oh my
I
gosh.
mean, it
Oh,
can
yeah.
only do so much. Just lay
I
this
send
way,
you-
go
or
there.
if I send you a picture of Willy Wonka, will you send me back?
Said Willy Wonka. Y'all, we're gonna have a show about singles and dating. We're gonna tell the truth about it. We're gonna pull
it's
back the covers on it.
I think I'll sit out.
No, we're gonna expose it all. Audia, we're gonna expose it all.
we are.
So here you are. I remember, how long has it been since you came back to Round Pen?
It was shortly after, I guess it was a few months after he passed away. I was laying there one Sunday morning, and God says, "Girl, get your booty up and get to church." And I went, "Oh, I'm tired," but I said, "Okay." So I had to go look and remember where it was and everything, but I drove over there. I sat in the back. Didn't talk to anybody. A couple people came up and said hi, introduced themselves. I was like, "Hi." Didn't fill out a visitor card. I just for the first couple of months, for the first probably month, I just came and sat and listened. And then one Sunday I was like, okay, I got to go talk to them. And so after church was over, I went up there and talked to Paul and Tubby and told them I was like, I've just screwed up my life. And I need to come here and I need to get clean and I need to get my life back together.
So then you started coming, and then you started coming to the singles. That's where I met you. And so for the last, 3 or 4 years now?
Yeah.
We hung out and traveled together and saw some cool stuff. And
Yeah.
That's where me and Ashton get booted out of the picture.
But but it's amazing how God preserved you throughout all of that you went through.
Oh, I totally agree.
It's just, there's so much more we could talk about. But
There is.
yeah, we want to
that's
have
enough.
you. We want to have you come back because I really want to go into seeing the hand of the Holy Spirit upon your life.
Yeah.
And seeing how He was even there in the midst of all of that mess, yet wooed you back.
Yeah.
And then what's happened since that time, because you really have an amazing story since that time, since I've known you. So
I think once I found out that there were people there that had stories like me, that had a life like in so many aspects that I had, I felt like, well, if God can get them up, then I need to get myself going here because He can do that for me too.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, so we're going to have you back because we're going to do that singles thing, and then we're going to talk about how Holy Spirit's worked in you since that time. But, man, praise God for that, How are we going to do our ending, because we don't have our third part?
Just figured we'd do it together, or I would say it.
I'm just so out of place without her.
Do we want to do our...
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do our commercial, and we do appreciate you guys giving, so listen up.
Hey y'all, if you've been blessed by SDU and you feel led to give to this ministry, here are some ways you can do that. You can text M3MI-GIVE to 888-364-4483. You can also go online to m3mi.org to the tab Sow a Seed. You can also send a check or money order by mail to P.O. Box 1318, Forney, Texas 75126, and all gifts are tax deductible. Thank you for your seed.
Yeah, thank you for your seed. We really mean that when we say it, because that keeps these lights on, and I'm not even going to talk about that electric bill, but I'm still upset about it.
Did you call them?
Yeah, I gotta call them. We've been so busy with stuff, but we're going to. But anyway, God's been so good, and we thank you that all of you who are giving, it keeps us in this place so that we've got a place to come and fellowship, and we've got a place to do this podcast, and man, God shows up on Sunday, and it's so amazing, and He's so good to us. So keep us in your prayers. Keep Ashton and Cash in your prayers, and we'll go ahead and do our tagline. See if we can do this without her. So go show some love,
Show some compassion,
give mercy, and go be Jesus today.
Hey, SDU family, thank you for joining us today. We do value your feedback, so if you have any questions or suggestions of topics, please feel free to reach out to our email at info@m3mi.org or reach out to us via text or call to our SDU hotline. The number is 214-600-7771.